Welcome in, everybody, to this Kansas City Chiefs post-game live stream presented by Bleacher Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joey Segura. And over the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes, we're going to break down the Kansas City Chiefs' Week 2 preseason victory over the Arizona Cardinals. They just won this game down in Arizona by a final score of 38-10. We're going to talk about some of the biggest winners and some of the biggest losers in this game and how it's going to affect the Chiefs going forward. Really good game, guys. That was probably the best preseason game I've seen in quite some time. Granted, the game didn't mean much, but I think that we kind of saw a lot of individual players show up and show out in this game. And without going over too many of our winners and losers, I wanted to talk about how good the Chiefs quarterback core was as a whole. I mean, we know Patrick Mahomes is that guy, but the Chiefs' 4 quarterbacks that played in this game combined for 31 of 38 for 393 yards thrown and 3 touchdowns. And Shane Buechele ran a touchdown in himself. So the Chiefs had great quarterback play all night. And I would say that Patrick Mahomes was not the leader among his quarterback, his quarterback brethren, because Shane Buechele in this game was absolutely incredible. But Joey, what was your thoughts on the quarterback play?
Kind of surprised by how well-rounded it was overall. Obviously, I've never doubted. I think the talent of you can't doubt the talent of Patrick Mahomes, but a veteran like Blaine Gabbert, you know what you're going to get out of him. It's nothing crazy, but he looked really good tonight as well. Buechele surprised me a lot, and I think he showed some flashes last week against the Saints. You could kind of see him putting it together a little bit, and this week he really did put it together. And he only had 10 attempts, but he picked them apart in all 10 of those attempts. He really took advantage of it and picked the Cardinals defense apart. And also the rushing side of it, dude. I mean, he only had 2 rushes, but they were 14 yards total. He looked great, and I really like him as the potential. I think the torch could be passed him as the backup quarterback here soon. I think he's still too young, similar to what I said last week, for Andy Reid to hand the reins over to him. But I do think that eventually he can be our backup quarterback for the rest of Mahomes' career.
And it's interesting because last week we saw Patrick Mahomes play a single series, and then Blaine Gabbert came in. And then Shane Buechele kind of got the third and fourth quarter. But Shane Buechele was the guy to come in after Patrick Mahomes exited this game after playing only 1 quarter. So I think that it is interesting to see that maybe Shane Buechele jumped the depth chart in terms of backup play. But I do think that Blaine Gabbert's probably going to be the backup quarterback for this team. Andy Reid loves to have guys that are veterans and know how to play this game. But very encouraging sign from Shane Buechele because, he didn't not complete a pass, and I think he looked really, really efficient. So that's going to be a guy to kind of keep an eye out on. But let's talk about our biggest winners and losers from this Week 2 preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals. So why don't we start off with the biggest winner, or at least, arguably the biggest winner. Rashee Rice was really good tonight, guys. Rashee Rice, second-round draft pick in 2023, has kind of exploded onto the scene. He was really good in training camp. He kind of had a glimmer of, hope in that first preseason game that we saw. In this preseason game, guys, he was all over the place. He had 8 receptions for 96 yards. I mean, big catch after big catch. The Chiefs might have something really special with wide receiver Rashee Rice. What do you think?
Completely agree. I think anytime Brett Veach takes a wide receiver with just his past draft history, you can't really doubt it. And you could watch some of his highlights in college, and obviously highlights aren't the whole story, so don't get me wrong there. But he just has that little spin move that he loves to pull out. That is killer. He's making catches in traffic, and not only is he making these catches in traffic, he gets that ball and reacts almost immediately. He's off to go. He doesn't need time to adapt or anything like that. He's reading this game very well. We do have to take into account, obviously, it's preseason, so it's going to be second and third string guys majority of the time. But even in that first quarter where the Cardinals were playing a lot of their first string defenders, he looked really good. And I think he could be that guy that the Chiefs are looking for. And they have a lot of faith in him, considering they didn't sign another veteran wide receiver, really. They're rolling with him and Sky Moore as that young duo, and I think that says a lot.
Well, one thing that's interesting, and this might be one of the themes of the live stream, the Chiefs have a lot more depth at wide receiver than I think anybody expected going into this preseason, because I think a lot of Chiefs fans were pretty antsy about how their wide receivers were going to be with Patrick Mahomes. And I think that if you've watched any preseason football whatsoever, I mean, a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit in Justin Ross, and Justin Watson caught a touchdown pass in this game. Amir Smith-Marset, like we're seeing guys, Rashee Rice, jump on the depth chart, and it's almost like the Chiefs have a problem now because they have too many wide receivers. They simply cannot take them all. And so I think that's really a refreshing surprise because I did not think the Chiefs were going to have this problem. And trust me, it is a good problem to have. So I think we're both in agreement that our biggest winner in this second preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals was the second-round rookie Rashee Rice. But I kind of want to, make the switch to talk about maybe the Chiefs' biggest loser, and that was the Chiefs' pass rush as a whole. I really wasn't impressed with the unit, and I'm really just looking at that first and second quarter and just looking to see if they could really apply any pressure. And again, guys, without Chris Jones on this roster, the front four really struggles to do anything in terms of getting to the quarterback. We're seeing the Chiefs try to, mix some stuff up with blitzing, and, Jamari Connor, he came off the blitz again, and they try to get creative with it. But Chris Jones, again, is the glue to the defense. He makes everything else function fluidly. And when he's not out there, it's very telling. And the Chiefs were not able to force any pressure whatsoever on that Arizona Cardinals quarterback room. And I think that's going to be a problem.
I couldn't agree more. And it's almost worrisome a little bit too. And it's preseason. So, I want to preface that before I'm not saying this is going to continue into the regular season. But when you look at the pass rush, they're getting close on some of the attempts, particularly Karlaftis, in my opinion. I thought he had a couple great runs to the quarterback, but he just wasn't able to finish it. And that's going to come down to the fact that there's not somebody inside causing that pressure. And when you don't have Chris Jones, this isn't I don't mean this as a slight to any defender on the team. There's no other lineman right now that can replace him in terms of the pressure that they can get to the quarterback. And with the youth that we have there, the development that you're going to see for George Karlaftis, or even some of the linebackers having a chance to get in there and make a play at the quarterback, it's going to be tough when you don't have Chris Jones. And that's going to worry me more about the development of the young D linemen as well, mainly.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs have some good interior pieces like Danny Sheldon and Derek Notty's a run stuffer. But, like we just said, they don't have anybody to force that internal pressure quite like Chris Jones does. And that's not, a knock on Derek Notty or Danny Sheldon, but when you don't have arguably the best interior defensive lineman in the game, your defensive line's going to suffer. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the preseason, is that without Chris Jones on this team out on the field making plays, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a regression from guys. And Charles Omenihu was out there tonight, but he's not going to be there for the first 6 games of the season. And that kind of leaves me really worried about the state of the defensive line come week 1 of the NFL season. So that's why I think my biggest concern is the Chiefs pass rush, and that makes them the biggest loser. But going over to the winning side again, let's talk about another wide receiver in Amir Smith-Marset. Amir Smith-Marset is a guy that, quite frankly, I didn't know much about coming into training camp, but I've done a little bit more research and I've watched him progress, but he's had a really good preseason. He had a good game last time, but today he was really special. I mean, he had a big time catch and he caught a touchdown pass from Blaine Gabbert, but he had, let me get the final stat sheet so I can officially tell you his numbers, because I know I was checking in the fourth quarter, but he was making plays deep into the fourth quarter. So I think that's another reason why, we might have something. So according to Google, he had 4 catches for 92 yards. Somehow that seems like less receptions than he actually had, but 4 receptions for 92 yards is kind of insane. He had 1 touchdown catch. I think Amir Smith-Marset is not going to make this team. So it was kind of tough making him a winner, but I think he's a winner because he performed so well. And while he might not make the team as a wide receiver, the Chiefs developed him into a wide receiver for some other team to take advantage of. And I think that even though he might not make this roster, Amir Smith-Marset has got to be a winner because he just put great tape out for like all other NFL teams to look at him and say, you know what? We want that guy on our roster.
Exactly what I was going to say. And I think for any wide receiver that's on the fringe of making the roster, it's going to be tough to make it unless Patrick Mahomes likes you enough to make you one of his guys. And I think we've seen a couple of them. Dieter stayed around, I think, longer than we expected him to, just because literally it was Patrick Mahomes' best friend. I think he's a good wide receiver, but I think Justin Watson's just a preferable target for Patrick Mahomes. I don't think the skill gap between him and some of these other fringe wide receiver guys is that large. It's just that Pat prefers him. So I don't know that Pat prefers Smith-Marsette too much. That's not a knock on Smith. That just might not be one of Pat's targets. Like you said, the fact that he went out there and he got great looks and some great tape. So when he probably gets cut or he makes not training camp, he makes the practice squad, it's enough tape for another team to look at and say, okay, look, I did this against an NFL defense. I did this against some first-string guys. I did this against some second-string guys. And hopefully he has a chance to come out and make a name for himself in the practice squad. And honestly, I just, the fact that he did it today was nice too. I think with all the QB play, it shows that you can mix in with different guys. Like you said, going long to the fourth quarter, he played with different quarterbacks the majority of this entire game, which is a big plus too.
Yeah, it's just, I didn't think the Chiefs were going to have this problem. They have too many wide receivers that are kind of on the bubble of making this team. Another guy we're going to talk about here in a minute, Justin Ross, guys. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say he's a lot to make this team, but if you just watch him run routes, last week he was really in towards the end of the game, third and fourth quarter mainly. In this game, he was running with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes actually threw a ball at his feet, wasn't a completion, but the fact that he was out there on the field with Patrick Mahomes is a really good sign. And you just saw some of the routes that he ran. He didn't have any spectacular catches, but you could kind of just tell by the separation that he was generating on his route running that, okay, the Chiefs genuinely have something potentially scary with Justin Ross. I mean, there was a play where Blaine Gabbert, I believe, overthrew him for a touchdown, but he had a defender basically shook. There was not a defender within 5 yards of Justin Ross. And if that ball was on target, he would have had a touchdown catch in this game. So I think that's another reason to watch individual play in the preseason and watch how they're running their routes and how crisp they're getting out of their snaps. And I think that Justin Ross is a perfect example of a guy that maybe didn't have a great game, but if you watch the tape and you watch the film and just watch what he was able to do out there, I think you walked away feeling pretty good about how Justin Ross is going to, acclimate on this team.
Oh, for sure. And I think, like you said, the Blaine Gabbert play where he overthrew him, he had a little side move and it was just over. He was in the corner of the end zone, and that's Patrick Mahomes. That's a touchdown all day. And he had one of those last week too. Justin Ross has been getting separation at an elite level right now. And I don't think the talent's ever been in question for Justin Ross. Justin Ross has been an elite talented player since he's been in high school. He showed it at Clemson when he would go crazy in the college football playoffs, and that's why the Chiefs have held on to him for as long as we have. Because I can tell you right now, if you have a guy like that who has an injury history that bad, you never hold on to him for 2 years on the practice squad. You don't even care. You might as well give it to a guy who can actually play. But they've kept that spot there because they fully believe that if he's healthy, he's a scary threat. Now, the only thing that makes me somewhat nervous with that type of prototype or archetype in a wide receiver is I feel like we have that in Kadarius Toney already. And I do think that they're not betting too much on Justin Ross. So it's not like they're going into the season expecting Justin Ross to be the second or even third wide receiver. And if he gets hurt, oh no, what are we going to do? That's just not what's going to happen here. They're going to use him hopefully to stay healthy a majority of the season, or even if he can't stay healthy a majority of the season, if he's available half the games, that's a great weapon to have, man.
It really is. And I think that I'm starting to actually buy into the Justin Ross hype. I've always believed that he was a talented player and a guy that could be something in an offense potentially, but his injury history, I was very scared, and I just didn't think that he was going to be able to play. And so far, he's played in both preseason games. Barring any injury, I think he's probably going to make this team. I don't know where he'll slot in the wide receiver core, but I think Justin Ross has been a big winner. Maybe not a winner in today's game, but I think that Justin Ross has maybe been the biggest winner in Chiefs preseason because I think he's probably going to make this team. I don't know where he slots in the depth chart. There's a lot of guys that are going to be fighting for that third, fourth, fifth, and sixth spot, but I think Justin Ross, unless he gets hurt, probably solidified a roster spot with his performance in the preseason. So that's a really good sign. Now, let's talk about another loser. And this is not really going to be a surprise to anybody. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a major loser in this game. And I almost hate to say it because it just kind of feels like every live stream I just like to rag on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. but he really wasn't good in this game. He had 4 carries for 10 yards, averaging 2.5 yards per carry, and he only had, I believe it was 2 catches for 8 yards out of the backfield. He ran with the first-team offense. He got a lot of snaps, a lot of looks. Nothing blew me away. I mean, when you got guys like Jerick McKinnon, who had one giant run up the middle with, I believe, the second-string offensive line, it just makes you wonder how can Clyde Edwards-Helaire not capitalize? Like, I'm looking at the box score right now. Jerick McKinnon had 1 carry for 19 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 3 times that, and he wasn't able to do anything. Like, I think there comes a point in time where you just have to admit defeat, and I think the Chiefs are at that point with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think his time is done. I think the reason that they've been so I guess adamantly using him in the preseason is so they can just show game tape so somebody might trade for him. But I don't think he's making the team over Deneric Prince. I don't think he's better than Jerick McKinnon, and he's definitely not better than Isaiah Pacheco. So at a certain point, where is he going to slot in? Because he's basically useless. Deneric Prince has been really good in the return game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not doing any of that. He's been pretty useless all throughout camp. In the first 2 preseason games, I've been less than impressed.
I don't think I'm going to go as harsh as you did. I do agree with the basis of everything you said. I think now, last year was the last full year I was willing to give him 100%, chance, I think. And I'm still willing to give him a chance. But now we saw Pacheco perform last year. Pacheco's the guy, and it's not even remotely a question. And Jerick McKinnon had more receiving touchdowns than Justin Jefferson did last year. So at this point, he's at minimum running back 3, I think. And it sucks. I mean, you never root against anybody. You never want to see anybody fail. But he just has never been able to put it together in the NFL. The thing coming out of college was that he's going to make you miss. If he gets that ball and he gets in any open space, odds were in college at LSU, he was going to make that first defender miss. And that's just not what's translated to the NFL level defenses. And he's never been able to adjust since then. And you can watch his height show how much it really matters. I mean, there was one play where he got a holding call because he just got demolished. I mean, and I can't blame him. Like, you can't get mad at the holding call because if he didn't hold there, he would have gotten killed. So it's
hard because he's vertically challenged. I hate to say it, but
yeah, exactly. So it sucks. Like I said, you never root against anybody in this league, especially not somebody on the Kansas City Chiefs. But I do think it might be time to pull the plug. I think you let him go for this season too. I think you let him play and see what happens. But it's almost been a cycle every year. He's inevitably going to get hurt. And I understand he's a running back. So running backs get hurt a lot more than most other positions on the offensive side of the ball, especially. But he gets hurt a lot. And in the games he does play, he's really not great enough of a talent where I'm like, oh, man, we need this guy in the lineup, even if he's only going to play 7 games a season. Unlike Justin Ross, who I could maybe make the argument, if he's going to play 7 games, I want him in the lineup. I don't know that I can say the same for Clyde.
I just think that we've seen everything that we're going to see from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I just don't think there's going to be some magic turning point where he just turns into this crazy running back talent that just comes out of nowhere. I just think that we've lived the Clyde Edwards-Helaire experience. We have found out the hard way that it just didn't work out. And I think that when it comes to picking that final roster spot of fringe guys that are going to make it, the only reason that I could justify Clyde Edwards-Helaire making this final roster is that he was a first-round draft pick. That is the only reason why I could see him making this team. A guy like Deneric Prince, who is pretty much going to be the guy that he's going up against to make this squad, I think Deneric Prince offers more in terms of special teams usage, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire offers nothing in terms of special teams usage. So I think the Chiefs need to go with the guy that's more valuable to the team, and that guy just so clearly is not Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And again, I hate to rag on him, but I just think we've seen everything there is to see, and I'm very, very confidently going to declare him a loser in the preseason. And I think that I'm ready to see somebody else. I really am. So let's go back to the winners. A guy that I really wanted to talk about in terms of being a winner was, well, do we want to talk about a group as a whole, or do we want to talk about a specific player?
If you want to go to either, if you have one more specific player in mind, we could do that.
I think a guy that is probably going to make this team now, which is a name that maybe a lot of you haven't even heard of, is tight end Matt Bushman. Matt Bushman, last year during training camp, I watched him a lot. He played with the Raiders a couple of years ago, and he ended up getting hurt last year. But he came back, and he's looked pretty good in the preseason. And I think the reason that I'm so high on him is that the Chiefs seem to be high on him. And also, we wouldn't be talking about this if Jody Fortson didn't have a season-ending injury. He's on IR. He's not going to play this season. And I think that maybe opens the door for a guy like Matt Bushman to make this team as the fourth tight end. I mean, we're looking at Travis Kelce, obviously, Noah Gray, Blake Bell, and I think Matt Bushman might get the edge at 4. And he had 2 receptions for 30 yards, averaging 15 yards a catch in this game. And I think it's just an interesting candidate. The Chiefs are going to have to make some roster cuts and decisions that are tough. But what do you think about Matt Bushman making the team as the fourth tight end?
Like you said, I think if you had told me this a week ago before Jordy unfortunately had that season-ending injury, I probably would have said no, and he's a practice squad player. But Andy Reid loves his tight ends. He loves those 2 to 3 tight end sets to run during the season. And to have another body out there too, he's looked good during the preseason. So I don't want to say he's just a body. You know, I'm not saying he's just always just out, but he looks good. And we need more tight ends. Andy Reid loves having tight ends. If this was a different kind of offense with different offensive sets, I'd maybe say no, because I don't think the talent's that great. But in this specific team setting, this specific team offense, and the way we love to run it, I totally think Bushman is a good candidate to make this roster.
For sure. I wanted to address this comment really quickly by K Wade 55. It says, let me guess, after tonight, the world isn't ending and the team might finish above 500, unlike last week. I want to point out, it's the preseason. We've always been on the train that these games are meaningless and they don't count. They don't matter towards anything. I think a lot of people saw last week's stream and overreacted. We were very much on the train of this game means nothing. It doesn't matter that your quarterback gave the game away in the final minute of the game. It doesn't matter. It's the preseason. You can do that kind of stuff, and it really means nothing. But I think that this game, we saw much more of a complete effort. I mean, the Chiefs came out and dominated. I mean, in every single facet, in every single quarter, the Chiefs dominated. They won this game by, 3 scores?
Yeah.
38-10? Like that is the kind of performance that I wasn't really expecting in the preseason. I think they played a really good all-around game, and that's a good thing to see. Again, I'm not really taking much stock into the wins and losses of the preseason, but, I mean, when you beat a team like that with your backups, I think it shows a lot, and it's definitely good for your depth moving forward. But getting into our final loser, and this was really hard because, again, I don't really think that there were a lot of losers in this game. I would say Richie James was a loser just because we really didn't see him do anything. But if you saw what he did against the Saints, he was a winner. So I do think that Richie James is an overall winner, but I was kind of disappointed that we didn't really get to see any Richie James in this game. So I think for that reason, he is a loser. But I wanted to shift really quickly while we have some time left to talk about a subject that we kind of were watching closely, and that is the position of the tackles. The tackle position is very interesting because if you've been paying attention, the Chiefs went out this offseason and they gave Jawan Taylor a lot of money to play left tackle. I mean, a lot of money. He was at right tackle tonight, and there was a play in particular where he got shoved to the ground, and he was a right tackle with the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. I understand that, but my understanding was that the Chiefs brought him in to play left tackle, but a couple months ago they signed left tackle Donovan Smith, who played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's had problems with holding in the past. But, Joey, what are your thoughts on the tackles? Because I don't have a lot of faith in them as a unit.
So I have faith, I think. My issue is strictly from a roster building point. And like I said, I want to preface this with, I think Brett Veach is a wizard. He's brought us 2 Super Bowls. He's made the right moves a majority of times. And even when we've questioned him, Tyreek Hill, for example, we all thought it was crazy and the sky was falling. And guess what? We won the Super Bowl. But to me, to pay a tackle that much money to play right tackle, I don't like it. I don't think there's any way for me to put it other than that. I don't like it. I think it's a waste of money at that point, because I feel like if that's the case, Mahomes is athletic enough and can move well enough where you could pay a way cheaper right tackle. And
We
you
had
could have
Andrew
more
Wiley
money.
last year.
Exactly. And Wiley was great. Wiley was serviceable. And I don't remember the exact number he went to. Was it to the Bears, I think?
No, he went to the Commanders.
Commanders, that's right. Yeah. And so he went to the Commanders, and I think it was like 11 or 12 million a year. But that's a couple million cheaper than what we gave him. Donovan Smith, right? Or am I getting him flipped?
No, Donovan Smith's our left tackle, but Jawan's our right tackle.
Jawan Taylor, that's right. So when you give Jawan, it's a lot less than that. And I'm not saying Jawan's not going to be great. I think he can be a solid tackle here. But I think you could have gotten a more serviceable right tackle for cheaper and had more money to then give you more flexibility when it comes to, I don't know, extending Chris Jones. So I'm not ready to label it as a losing situation yet. I think it's something to keep our eyes on. And at the end of the day, I trust everything Brett Veach does. I think he makes the right choice more often than not. And it's not very often that you hear many fan bases talking well about their general manager. It always feels like a position that everybody's complaining about. But with how great his track record has been in the past, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here.
I did just think it was worth noting because when you do pay a guy like Jawan Taylor that much money, and he had the expectation to play left tackle, seeing him at the right tackle position and not struggle, but not look like a dominant right tackle, that makes me a little bit anxious. But again, we're going to watch the situation much closer. And I think that come regular season time, once these guys have more reps, I think we'll probably see a more finished product. And with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, I mean, you saw that throw that he made jumping in the air, which he almost completed to MBS. Yeah. Like, he's a magician, and he doesn't need the greatest offensive line to get things done. But again, like you said, from a roster building perspective, giving a guy like Jawan Taylor as much money as you did to play right tackle might not make sense when you got a guy like Chris Jones just sitting on his couch watching the defensive line squander. So I do think that is something to point out and something to watch. But overall, I think the Chiefs had a really good game. I think that there were way more winners than there were losers. Reiterating the point again, the winners in this game were Rashee Rice. I think he was the unanimous, the biggest winner.
Yeah.
Justin Ross, Amir Smith-Marset, and I would say Matt Bushman was our final winner from this Week 2 preseason game. And the losers were the Chiefs' pass rush as a whole, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Richie James. But again, Richie James just didn't get much of a sample size. After having a great game last week, I just expected to see him a little bit more. But that's a problem when you have so many wide receivers, man. It's going to be a different guy each and every week. So it was very good to see guys like Amir Smith-Marset and even Justin Ross kind of show up and show out in this second preseason game. So the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Arizona Cardinals 38-10 down in Arizona in this second week of the preseason. They moved to 1-1, and they return August 26th at home to play the Cleveland Browns in the third preseason game. It should be a good one, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much Patrick Mahomes and the first team offense plays in that game. So for Michael Darcy and Joey Segura, thank you for watching this Chiefs post-game live stream presented by Bleacher Report.